Nicole Auerbach is a senior writer for The Athletic, and she joins us now. Nicole, you listened to the whole press conference. What was your main takeaway?
My main takeaway was just how, honestly, tone deaf I felt some of the answers were, especially when Urban Meyer was asked specifically about Courtney Smith and the message he would want to send to her. He did not seem prepared, and he said that he apologizes. He's sorry for everyone who's involved in this situation, that the situation we're in, which to me equates what he's gone through these last few weeks, which he talked about earlier in the press conference, as being a tough stretch for him to be away from football practice and away from his football team with what Courtney Smith is going through. And I think, that was really tone deaf. That was really troubling. That makes me question whether or not he has learned anything about domestic violence as an issue throughout this experience or throughout the years.
I talked with Jerry DiNardo a few minutes ago about what message was sent, and he said sort of what you're saying was that I don't think the right message was sent, that this was addressed in the appropriate way. What do you think was sent in terms of a message about this press conference?
Well, it felt like to me that Urban Meyer is irritated that he has, is going to be away from his football team for a month and a half. That's honestly what it felt like, reading body language, reading through some of the answers, including the non-answer he said about when he was asked if he agrees with his punishment, where he basically said, I'm going to, toe the party line and agree with what my president and athletic director do and say, which means that he doesn't agree with his punishment and still possibly doesn't think he did anything to warrant discipline. And, that is frustrating because that is exactly the wrong message to be sending. And I thought that Jerry made a lot of really good points about that. The line of what's good and bad and how to handle a situation is not if there are charges pressed or not. I feel like we have had this conversation over and over in these cases. There are so many reasons why charges may not be filed, especially in the case of domestic violence. And, we have seen pressure on these women not to do something, pressure to seem loyal, pressure from family members, from people tied to football programs, powerful institutions to encourage women not to go to the police. We have seen police departments not press charges even when they could have or should have. There are so many reasons why that should not be the burden of proof line here. There's a reason that we're talking about whether or not someone should be fired and not should someone be in jail. It's a different burden of proof. It's a different line in the sand. And I think that, like Jerry pointed out, we're missing the opportunity to explain that to people, that just because someone is not charged with domestic violence doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to act. You can remove that person from a situation where they are imparting wisdom and trying to raise this next generation of men in society. They're in situations where that man is around other women, someone you knew had a pattern of violence. All of these things, you can do something. You don't have to wait for there to be charges. You don't have to use that as a crutch and an excuse for not doing more. And I think we completely missed that opportunity because they did not focus on the act of domestic violence itself.
And Nicole, the counter argument, right? You've heard it a bunch, which is, well, what prevents anyone from going around and accusing someone of something and then automatically they lose their job? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, there's a reason that this stuff gets investigated, gets reported, that people are not just saying whatever, that people are verifying, reporters are verifying, schools are investigating and verifying information and cross-checking and figuring out if things are happening the way that people are saying that they did. And that's the whole point here when people say what you're saying, that counter-argument of anyone could do this to ruin someone's career. You have to verify stuff. You have to have other evidence that corroborates a case and in a situation and an incident in anything. And in anything that you're reporting, and that's, the news media, that's, again, an investigative team, a group of people whose job it is to investigate this type of thing. You're looking for all of that, and if you cannot prove something happened a certain way, you can't use that as justification for something. But Ohio State is admitting failures here. Ohio State is admitting that they should have done more. Ohio State did fire this person. So you can't really say that in this case because it has been verified by independent investigators, by the university, by what these people are saying themselves, and we have all seen the photos and the text messages from Courtney Smith herself.
Well, you bring up the Courtney Smith text messages. What was your reaction when Urban said Wednesday evening he was, quote, not aware of those text messages to his wife?
It's the same reaction I had when I first saw them in Brett McMurphy's original story about them. It's very hard to believe. This is someone who has always had his wife at his side. She's always been very involved in his football programs. He has gone on record many, many times. He's talked to so many different people about how important she is in his life, how she's his partner in his life. And it seems really difficult for me to believe that her saying to someone that someone scares her is not a message that she's going to share with her husband. So there's only two scenarios here that make sense. One is that, well, maybe three. One is that, maybe Urban is not telling the full truth on this. Tonight, they had to acknowledge that he did not tell the truth at Big Ten Media Days. He did not tell Gene Smith about Zach Smith's 2009 incident when he was hiring him. There have been other things he's left out, throughout this whole story the last month. Or you have Shelly Smith potentially not feeling comfortable telling her husband about her fears about Zach Smith. And that is concerning in a completely different way. I think there's a totally separate story here about the culture that women and these coaches' wives and maybe daughters and maybe cousins, any of these women around these football programs feel powerless to do something to stop something like that. So that is also, a possibility here and a really frustrating one at that, if that is the case. But I still find a very hard time. My initial reaction is I have a very hard time believing that he did not know about that when he is this close with his wife and she is that involved in pretty much everything he does.
Important insight and perspective from Nicole Auerbach, senior writer for The Athletic. Nicole, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.